actually a bit difficult to think of where to start. There have been so much happening on the news, and you followed them. But at the same time, when you look like a bit deeper into it, it's a bit thin. What's been going on. I'll explain now. I'm happy that Murad went before me, so he gave some of the context and he gave some of the information I do not need to repeat. The tension between the US and the Islamic regime is not a new one. This is as long as the history of the Islamic regime. Even though the Islamic regime came to power by the West, with the US as its leader, they brought the Islamic regime into Iran in 1979 in order to suppress a revolution that was taking place then, and the West was very, very frightened that the left, the communists, might gain some power. In order to suppress that, especially it was in the Cold War era, they brought them. But because of the revolutionary spirit that was still going on after Khomeini and the Islamic regime came to power, the left was strong, the workers' movement was becoming stronger and stronger, and you had the war in Kurdistan against the regime that was partly led by a leftist communist organization, and the council movement in Iran by the workers started then. And we were witnessing that councils were spreading in at least larger factories, and it was becoming like regionalized. So we go from 1979 to 1982, 3 years. At this time, because the left was strong, and because the majority of the left of the time was anti-imperialist, not quite clear even what imperialism was for some of that populist left, the Islamic regime chose a very, very smart tactic, and that was occupying the US embassy and taking hostages and diverting some of the leftists towards itself. And this has sort of clicked from that time, that any time there is some problems inside the country, any time the left is coming or workers are doing something, any time he wants to suppress the protest movement in Iran, it all starts the slogan, "Death to America, America the great Satan," and "Death to Israel." This has been a rhetoric, and it's only a rhetoric in Iran for the past almost 40 years. This has bought time for it, breathing space for it, but you know what? 1981 was the finishing point of that US embassy thing, and then you had the Iran-Iraq war. They started a bloodshed of the opposition figures, and a lot of leftists and communists were hanged, tortured, and imprisoned in that era. So we're talking 80s, and people are still trying for justice for that era. The families, the people who were, and the leftist organization and communist organization. There are different figures. We do not have an exact figure, but some people even talk about 100,000 deaths in that era. A really, one of the bloodiest parts of the human history that I think it would be registered in history, what happened in that period in Iran. But this continued war, and soon some leftists got their brain back and realized that's only a game, but regime has been using that. After 2003, when US and its coalitions attacked Iraq, after that, ironically, it was the Islamic regime which gained a lot of power in Iraq and started this militia mercenaries, Hashd al-Shabi, who are still fighting against the protests in Iraq at the moment. And Qasem Soleimani was also the general leader of that, Hashd al-Shabi. And then and in Afghanistan it started growing, and then in Syria. By the time the Syrian war started, Qasem Soleimani, they say, is the person who convinced Putin to intervene in Syria. And then a lot of bloodshed in Syria, you know, partly due to the Western powers, what I call state terrorists, Israel, Daesh or ISIS, and partly, and a very great part, by Quds army, as they call them, with the leadership of Qasem Soleimani. So when you look at it, Islamic regime under the military leadership of Qasem Soleimani has orchestrated a great deal of suppression in the region, not only in Iran, in the region, and killed a lot of people in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and in Iran. They say a lot of a lot of young people from Afghanistan were taken by Qasem Soleimani to fight in Syria, and they were all killed. So this is the monster you're talking about, Qasem Soleimani, who's been killed by the U.S. But everybody knows U.S. is not nobody innocent, you know. So you're talking about these, what we call two poles of terrorism, since 2001 that the West attacked Afghanistan. They've been having these games. They help each other. I'm not talking about conspiracy theory. Sometimes they do some things in the background as well. But the way they've been killing, maiming, destroying the region, killing the people there, has been helping each other. They're playing in each other's hand. They've been doing it since 2001. But things changed. The scenery in the region changed 2 years ago, exactly 2 years ago today, a few days more than 2 years, 29th of December, yes, 2017, an uprising started in Iran. People clearly on the streets for the first time said death to the Islamic regime. Clearly said we don't want Islamic regime. And then the media here said, okay, therefore Rouhani. And then people said, death to Rouhani. They said, okay, therefore Khamenei. Then people said, death to Khamenei, and they shut up. Then you heard nothing from the media, because they realized it's not one faction against the other. As they've tried for the past 20 years, anytime people protested, workers protested, the Western media, the pundits, some of them paid by the Islamic regime, and all these state reformists, who are on pay list of the Islamic regime and have come to the West, they go on and on about these two factions fighting against each other. One is a hardliner, one wants reforms. It's none of that. And very clearly people shouted this slogan: reformists, hardliners, the game is over. So maybe the deaf ears could hear is not one of the factions against the other. They don't want the regime, the whole thing. And then you had the workers' movement, the working class raised to a very, very prominent position in the protest movement in Iran. Labor leaders like Ismail Bakhshi and some of the leaders of the steel factory in Ahvaz, they became so prominent. They became, for the first time in Iran, the labor leaders become, with the language of today, celebrities in Iran. This has never happened before. You have a very large working class population. They're all educated. They're all urban. When in 1979, a lot of them had migrated from rural areas to become workers. So it's a whole different scene we have. And the slogan for council ruling of the country and council running of the factories became a big slogan, And just a month ago, when we had the student movements in the universities, this slogan again became prominent. So, looking at a country, an important country with 80 million population, with a lot of wealth, an important country both at the time of the previous regime and now, it's facing a great uprising, protest movement, in which the working class has a prominent role, in which the leftist slogans have found prominence. So what would you do? All Western governments, EU, US, all of them. First, US, Trump thought of a regime change, bringing the previous regime, but then realized, no, that's not going. People don't buy it. So he said, we don't want to change the regime. Oh, God. We don't want to change the regime, and we just want to change. So since I don't have much time, I brought you to here. I just want to add the Iraq protest movement. It's about 3 months. Iraqi youth have come to the streets, shouting slogans against sectarian governments that the West, under the guise of democracy, brought there. Shia, Sunni, Arabs, Kurds, Assyrians, what have you. They said they don't want that. And they started the protest against Islamic regime. They torched the Islamic embassy. So what I think Qasem Soleimani and the Islamic regime decided to do in order to divert both the attention of the Iranian people and Iraqi people, and we had Lebanon, which also the protest was against the sectarian government, and Hezbollah, which is one of the more important allies of the Islamic regime. So they decided to do something to divert. And as usual, Death to America came. So what they attacked a US base in Kirkuk, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and they killed one contractor, American contractor. Then US took revenge and attacked another place, and some people killed there. And then again, they attacked the US embassy in Baghdad. So these things, in order to divert the attention of the whole uprising in the region, and then we had the killing. So, but now when you look at it, after, as Murad mentioned, see what happened. 12 missiles. No American or coalition soldiers were killed. I'm not upset that they were not killed, but what I'm just trying to say what kind of military attack it was. Few Iraqi people or soldiers died though. And then immediately Trump said, no, we don't want to have war with Iran, we want to just change its behavior, and told NATO and Britain and France, no war with Iran. And they said, okay, we did that, please don't do anything, and that's it. And Khamenei came and said, that was a big attack, and now we taught a lesson to US, and all of this propaganda that they always use. But the attack became a joke immediately among the Iranian oppositions, in the social media, and then they very quickly it came out that 4 hours, some people say 6 hours, before the attack, the US was made aware that there is going to be an attack. So you see what a kind of, it's a show, complete show. So what I want to say in this few minutes that I have left, I know there's a lot of holes in what I said because the story is so huge, you cannot really put everything into what happened, they tried to quell the protest movement, Iran, Iraq basically, and Lebanon and the region. That was the aims of both sides, but they did not succeed. Yesterday, the youth of Iraq in Nasiriyeh, they had a big demonstration, very huge, and one of the main slogans was, no to Iran, no to US. Perfect, beautiful. And in Iran, Murad mentioned the November, 1,500 people killed, 10,000 arrested and still being tortured. A bloodbath. They thought, Islamic regime thought that they would quell everything would be stopped. No. We had the student movement 2 weeks after with all the slogans defending the workers, defending working class, defending councils, and protesting the regime for what it's doing, especially the killings of the November time. So they realized that there's just nothing they can do about it. And for the last thing I want to say is, Islamic regime is deeply, deeply in crisis, economically and politically.